Hello everyone and thank you for joining me. Since the H3 is copying almost to a T the MUJI fountain pen, I thought it was appropriate to follow up with it. A little bit shorter and a little bit lighter than the MUJI, the H3 it's a pretty decent copy of the MUJI and it comes with its own positives and negatives. Maybe more negatives than the MUJI based on the copies that I own. There are a lot of similarities between them. Same seamless and stepless design between cap, section and barrel, one posted or not. Similar all-metal build, made mostly of aluminium. The only big difference from a weight perspective is that the H3 it's a little bit lighter, probably because it is ever so slightly smaller in length than the MUJI. One change that in my eyes was not ideal from the original recipe was that HongDian decided to add threads on the section. So basically you have to twist to cap or uncap the pen, but they still kept the same idea where part of the cap goes inside the section. From my point of view, they complicated and made it even harder now to clean that part of the fountain pen from ink if you have to put the section inside the ink bottle. Honestly, I like this part even less than the MUJI. As such, personally I always fill it up using a syringe, as you will see during the writing part. The other thing that I don't like as much is how it posts. While they kept the same idea that the MUJI fountain pen has, it does not post as secure and the cap moves around a little bit. Not a big deal I guess, but enough to be annoying depending on the mood you might be or the situation you are while using it. One plus over the MUJI fountain pen though will be that it comes with a converter included, which is a good thing. As for the nib, well, let's ink it up and see how it performs. I decided to use the same ink that I have used in the MUJI fountain pen just to give it basically the same chance of success. I wasn't planning to use this video as a one pen versus another one, but it sort of ended up being like that, so I might as well set up similar environments for both of them. The only difference is that this time I have filled the fountain pen using a syringe, as mentioned earlier. As you have seen, the threads are pretty fine and their position is unfortunate, so cleaning it will be quite a chore and annoying. Much easier and faster to actually fill it up with a syringe than spend time on cleaning up those threads or the inside of that groove. Filling it up was no real issue, everything worked as it should have. The fountain pen started writing right away without any hesitation and really had no issue during the writing process. The nib feels a little bit scratchy on reverse, but still works and it is usable. It is, however, a really stiff nib, so there is no bounce to it and as such no line variation really. It is, however, pleasant to use. On the normal side it's actually a more wet nib and maybe a little bit smoother, so some people might like that more over the Schmidt. However, because of that I'm not sure it will give me the same control during the Scribble, but I guess we will be seeing that pretty soon. Speaking of, let's see if this nib will force me in a different type of Scribble, or at least a different approach on how I do a Scribble. For today's Scribble, I still had no idea of what I wanted to scribble, blank head basically. And as usual, I started with some random lines and shapes that I stack on top of each other and just let it evolve in whatever it wanted it to be. And it eventually evolved in some sort of a rock being with a silly green on its face. Almost sort of similar with the other being that turned out to be a little bit more rounded that I did with the PenBBS 323 a couple of weeks back. It's just that this one turned out to be more like a rock or rocky, or it has a rocky feeling to it, with some leaves coming out of the top of its head or hat. Can't figure out what that is on top of its head. I'll let you decide. Is it part of its head or is it just a hat? I think originally I was trying to go for some sort of a beak, but it quickly evolved into something else. in, I guess, whatever you're seeing at the end. One thing that kind of bothered me about the final drawing is that it did turn out a little bit dark, maybe. And I will partially blame it on the nib since it was dumping a little more ink on the page than what I wanted to. But also partially on me because I should have known better and changed my approach and not darken as much all the parts of the scribble. I kind of like the end result in the end, but not because of the character that I drew, but actually because of the fact that eventually the scribble for today kind of evolved into a little bit of experimentation. At one point in time, I decided to introduce a regular pencil. I believe it was a regular HB. I forgot what it was from. I believe it might have been from Grand & Toy, something that I had for a very long time, and I keep it around when I use it, when I need it. Anyway, so I introduced that pencil in the mix and I tried to shade some parts of the scribble with it, just to see what will happen. And the cool thing that I discovered is that this pencil on top of this specific ink gives a really cool effect depending on how the light hits it. It's like it's turning the darker part of the ink that already has a little bit of shine to it into a purple glowing reflective ink. Pretty neat effect. I actually really like it. I'm not sure if you can do this with other inks, but I might try it in the future. I try to capture that effect at the end and hopefully the camera will be able to capture it properly. Flat out, you don't actually notice the effect, but move it a little bit to a 45-degree to the light source and those eyes pop at you like a reflective piece of paper. The other thing that I experimented with, it's after I did a little bit of an oopsie and took that opportunity to, well, experiment further. I dropped the pen on the page by mistake and a ink drop stained the paper. So I used that to draw some quick lines that in themselves they evolved into a butterfly. And then since I liked the result of it, I added one more butterfly in similar style just for good measure. And then even more, I added some flowers and grass and it kind of evolved into its own little garden with a rocky being sitting in the middle of it. Took that even further by starting to add even more shade with the pencil around the shapes that I had on the page. Towards the end, I actually ended up using just the pencil and made me realize how much I miss drawing with a pencil. I do need to plan a day where I will just use a pencil for the fun of it. Or at least I think I might start combining pencil and ink a little more often. I kind of like the mix, to be honest with you. I kind of like the idea that came out of it. And even if I just use it for, putting like a quick background behind whatever I'm drawing, maybe it's kind of cool. Might be odd, but I do like it. What do you think? So the scribble in the end turned out interesting, in my opinion, but mostly because of the little experiments that I tried, not so necessarily because of the main subject that I have on the paper. So I will put it in the W column, but only because of the success of those experiments, well, success in my opinion, not because of the main character. I will try and find a more interesting subject maybe next week, and maybe I will try and make some effort to come up with something, rather than just go blank on the paper. I might still use the same ink, not sure, we will see, maybe try something new, well, new from whatever inks collection I have. Putting the scribble aside though and focusing on the fountain pen, I have to say I enjoyed using it. The nib in itself, while it was not working like the nib on the MUJI, was still very pleasant to use. It's just that I had to adjust on the fly as I was drawing with it because of the more flow that I was putting on the page. And this is the small part that I blamed it on the nib, because I was not sure how to go about using its flow for my benefit, and as such ended up with maybe some darker parts than I wanted. Still good though. In the end, I guess it is my fault for not using the tool to the best of its abilities, and I probably should have practiced a little bit before doing the drawing to actually see how the nib behaves on that paper. The only part that I did find annoying was the cap and how I was posting. In a few parts, what I was trying to use the fountain pen as light as possible, and I was holding it as high as possible on the barrel, that darn cap was bending and make me do weird lines with different pressures as I was drawing with it. It wasn't really behaving properly, and that was truly annoying, to be honest. But if you just use it for regular writing, I doubt you'll ever have an issue with it. And who knows, maybe your copy that you'll get might not have the same issue. I mean, we all know that Chinese manufacturing and QA is not really up to par with maybe more European or American counterparts, even though those ones sometimes they do lack quite a lot. Anyway, in the end, a pleasant fountain pen to use nonetheless, and I really do not regret having it in my collection. I think with a few changes to it, this could have been a wonderful fountain pen. It's just, let's say, 80% there. So in the end, would I recommend this fountain pen? Honestly, nothing wrong with it. But if somebody will force me to choose between the MUJI and the H3 and I can only have one, considering that they sell basically for the same amount of money, I will have to say that I would choose the MUJI every single time, only because of the better build and the more versatile, for me, nib that it has. And I guess with that said, enjoy the rest of the time lapse, and I'll see you next time. Wish you all the best and a wonderful day or night, wherever you are.